morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for this fourth webinar in our 2025 CSCC Fall Webinar Series. My name is Raina Dyer-Barr, and I serve as the Director of Community College Research and Engagement in the School of Education at the University of Pittsburgh. The University of Pittsburgh School of Education is the home of the Council for the Study of Community Colleges. Today's webinar is being presented by 2025 CSCC Double Diamond sponsor, the University of Pittsburgh School of Education. And just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. All mics have been muted. I'll ask that you remain muted for the duration of the presentation as it's being recorded. You can unmute to participate in the question and answer session at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to our facilitator for today, Dr. Pamela Eddy, and she'll introduce our panelists and we'll have a conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Raina. Well, thanks for joining us today on this Strategic Leadership in Turbulent Times webinar. I think the topic is very timely for all of us if you just open a newspaper any single day. We're very lucky today to have two sitting presidents as panelists. Dr. Michael Baston, who's president of Cuyahoga in Ohio Community College, and Dr. Heather Shotton, who is the president of Fort Lewis College in Colorado. I am going to start with asking each of the panelists to present a little bit of an introduction of themselves, in particular saying a little bit about their leadership journeys. And I'll start with Dr. Baston, please.
Certainly great to be here with you and to the audience today. It is truly turbulent times, but it is also a time to lean in. And so I began my career here at Tri-C 4 years ago when I became the 5th president of Cuyahoga Community College. We are in Cleveland, Ohio, where we serve nearly 40,000 students who are 12 to 89, and a whole host of programs that really try to recognize this idea that learning is a lifetime affair. I began my career in higher education as a college attorney, representing educational corporations, religious institutions, and nonprofits, and then moved into higher ed as a faculty member for some of my academic clients. And so for these 30 years, we've graduated thousands and have tried to help improve our communities by engaging with the idea of the power of the possible. So certainly glad to be with you today.
Great, thanks very much. And Dr. Shotton.
Hi, good morning. Good to be with you all today. I'm Heather Shotton, she, her pronouns. I'm a citizen of the Wichita and affiliated tribes. I'm also Kiowa Cheyenne, and I am the president for Fort Lewis College, which is situated on the traditional homelands of the Nuchu or Ute people. And here in Durango, Colorado. I have served as president. I am now entering my 4th month as president for Fort Lewis College, but have been here for 3 years. Previously served as our vice president of diversity affairs. Fort Lewis College is a unique institution with a unique history. We are a small public liberal arts college located in the southwest part of Colorado. We are a rural institution and the only 4-year institution in this southwest part of Colorado. So we have a number of responsibilities to the community, and as that only 4-year institution, we have a very unique student population. We enroll a high percentage of first-generation college students. We are a Native American serving non-tribal institution and an emerging HSI. So we serve very unique needs of people in this region. My journey to the presidency is probably, I don't know how typical it is. I started my career in student affairs. And then later moved into faculty, where I spent about 15 years as faculty at the University of Oklahoma. Prior to joining Fort Lewis College, I've worked at different types of institutions: small private liberal arts, large public flagship research institutions, and then now at Fort Lewis College as a public liberal arts college. Previously served as our vice president of diversity affairs and acting dean of students before I took on the role of the president.
Great. Thanks very much for that introduction. I think having this robust background will be really helpful as we get into some of the questions. College presidents are in the hot seat today. What would you identify as the top 3 issues facing college presidents? And this time I'll start with you, Dr. Shotton.
Sure. I mean, I think 2 things definitely are top of mind for me. Budgetary issues, as we're in the midst of a federal government shutdown, but what that means for our institutions, how that impacts us, as well as the trickle-down effect of the federal budget on our state budgets and appropriations. I mean, those are things that are clearly impacting us, particularly as a small regional institution, that impacts us directly, and we are contending with that daily. I think the other thing that is probably most pressing in my conversations with faculty every day are attacks on academic freedom. And concerns about those attacks on academic freedom and free expression, and how we as institutions continue to uphold our commitment to the core tenet of academic freedom in higher education, and why that is so critical to how we function. And then I think just the national landscape and how that is impacting our students, and the uncertainty that they are experiencing both in their home communities and on our campuses, in terms of how that will impact our ability to serve them, what their experience is in college, what they are grappling with, and how we are helping them to navigate this time, are certainly top of mind for me.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Baston.
I certainly agree with my presidential colleague. I would also highlight a couple of other things. I think one of the most important things right now is the restoring of public trust in higher education. You know, we have so many people that say college isn't for everyone, or most of those folks send their kids to college but don't want yours to go. You know, it's the idea that we shouldn't spend it costs so much to go to college. Well, public institutions like myself and Fort Lewis, we are public institutions, so that we are not sort of having students come into, luxury high-rise apartment residence halls that have folks actually folding their laundry and doing their shopping and, doing their fingernails with mani and pedis. We're not doing that at our institutions. We're actually helping people think about the power of their future. But we have to do a better job, in a sense, of also demonstrating value, because for a long time, the imbalance of expectation of the professor here and the student here, that imbalance of tradition that is generational, has been a problem, because students can choose not to have to live in that construct anymore. And students have access to information that they never had before, so they can question and probe. And so we've got to ultimately help our educational institutions know that relevance means recognizing what students want as well. And many of them are not just sitting under a tree waiting for the apple to fall so that they can be inspired. Many of them are coming here so that they can earn. And for some schools, not probably our institutions, faculty see that as a dirty word, like that career or workforce, or you're trying to make us a training institution. Well, you have a professional practice area. Why shouldn't students have a professional practice area? So it's really restoring the public trust, demonstrating value. It's leading through the current financial pressures that my colleague mentioned, and also the demographic pressures. Quite frankly, I'm in the second poorest big city in America, in Cleveland, Ohio. And in my community, over the next 10 years, we'll lose 118,000 people. We have low birth rates from the last major recession that has impacted traditional age populations. But we also have so many people who have some college and no degree, but they're still saddled with that debt and can't get back into school. So we've got to deal with the financial pressures, the demographic pressures. And then the last thing I will say, and it goes back to a point I was making earlier, managing culture while driving change. we're at this intersection, right, of tradition and transformation. Some of the challenges and legislative prohibitions that are coming from all over the country are also in part because we didn't do the self-regulating that we needed to do. We didn't do some of the mind shift things at higher ed that we need to do. We haven't always been as fair to students. And I was a student affairs professional for many years as well. So we haven't always been open to students having different points of view than faculty members who then could penalize a student in the class for having a different point of view. So we just have to recognize that there are some aspects that we as higher ed have to own. There's some aspects where we didn't focus on the career development of our students, and we didn't recognize that they have to be on a path to economic self-sufficiency because we thought that learning was the only thing. And so we've got to recognize that there's some ownership higher ed has to take. There's a need to be more relevant in ways that we have to be thoughtful about. We are under attack by so many different directions, but some of the things we have to own, and we have to now get people to move from tradition into transformation.
Great. Well, I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Baston, and ask you the next question. Now, given the context that you just described, how are you approaching your own strategic leadership and addressing some of these challenges?
Well, in my case, we basically went through a process called Vision 2030. This is our 5-year sort of plan, transformation plan, not a strategic plan, a transformation plan. Because what we have said is that if we're going to be effective, we can't simply do the things that we have done and assume that what we experienced pre-pandemic is just going to magically reappear. It's not. We can't just say, well, if we let students have AI, they're all going to cheat. Like if we take on these sort of very hardened approaches to sort of bucking the realities of the future, we will be a relic of the past. So we have organized the work. We've interviewed hundreds of people internally and externally. We had collected about 8,000 artifacts from various stakeholders on what that future state of our institution should be from a transformation lens. And we came up with 3 very basic pillars: activate people and potential. Because if we really want our students and our faculty and staff to be a transformative institution, then we got to really think about how we're investing in that transformation. The second is aligning path and purpose. So that really thinking about the stackable credentials, really thinking about teaching and learning excellence, really thinking about what it means to meet students where they are and to address the regional talent shortages that exist now. And then the last one is amplifying our community impact. In our case, we're a community college. The community in the middle of our name really strengthens and amplifies what we do. We see ourselves as that place where it doesn't matter what age, what zip code, what background. We take the top 100% of people who have drive and interest and willingness to move forward. So for us, as we think about alignment and activation, you have to get on the same page. And so for us as people, path, and promise, the promise we make to each other and the promise we make to our students in our community. But we've got to get on the same page and we got to move forward. That is how we have done our work around transformation.
Great, thank you very much. And how about you, Dr. Shotton? What's happening on your campus?
Yeah, so this must have been the year of either strategic planning or non-strategic planning and thinking about it differently. Last year, we went through a very robust strategic planning process, which was interesting for us because we were in the midst of a search for our next president. But it felt really important at Fort Lewis College to engage in that because so much of it was coming from our campus and local community and partners that we wanted to move forward with that work because it meant that the next president we chose needed to be deeply aligned with that. And in that, we engaged over 1,000 people across campus in the community with our tribal partners to think about what the next 5 years look like for our institution, and grappling with some of the very questions that my colleague laid out, particularly around this this idea of restoring trust and what is our purpose? How are we transforming our institution? How are we transforming our community and being a driver? And in that, the engagement was really critical, that this was emerging from our campus community and our community partners to drive what that work would look like. And so it emerged as something that was different than we've had before. So rather than kind of pillars or things that are separate, it emerged as braided strands and we identified 5 braided strands that guide our vision and our work for the next 5 years. Academic excellence is broadly talks about how we are shifting our approach to academics, how we're thinking about that through experiential learning, how we're thinking about that through different types of learning opportunities. Is it stackable credentials? Is it workforce development? What do we need to do to shift to make sure that we are meeting needs, staying relevant, and also staying true to who we are? And as a largely undergraduate institution, and how are we doing that in a way that meets our students where they are? The other strand addresses being a student-ready institution. So shifting away from putting the onus on students and how we are changing our systems and structures within the institution to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the students and the people who are coming to Fort Lewis College, and that we are taking a hard look at what we need to do to transform the institution in a way that gets outside of these long-standing structures that have not really served any student well since the founding of higher education, and that we can look at that differently, and how we are preparing our faculty and staff to receive those students and to serve them. Reconciliation was a critical strand in that, and that is because Fort Lewis College has a unique history and began as a federal Indian boarding school. And so we have done a great deal of work to reconcile that history. And in a time where there's a lot of pushback on that kind of work, it was really critical that we leaned into it because it shapes how our students, with a 38% Native student body, are going back into their communities and building tribal nations, building up their communities, and utilizing degrees in ways that move beyond discussions of ROI and what that means. What is the return on investment for an entire community that sends their students to us? The other strand, the 4th strand, is around basic needs. As a rural institution, we are finding more and more that are not just our students, but our faculty and staff are struggling with basic needs, particularly in this economy. And so how are we a driver in that? How are we transforming the institution to be one that is a caring institution that so many people are talking about right now? And how are we investing in our people and making sure that people are able to thrive, both our students and our employees? And then the final piece is community connections and how we see ourselves as critical partners with tribal nations, with industry. How are we meeting the needs of our local community in this region of Colorado and the Four Corners region to make sure that we are good partners addressing technology needs that are coming for us, workforce development, industry needs, and also making sure that we're meeting the needs of our students.
Thanks very much. So as you think about the ways you're looking forward and laid out for plans, what are you seeing as some of the key attributes that you're bringing to your leadership that you tap into? And how might they differ from some you may have used in the past? And I'll tag you, Dr. Baston, on this one.
Well, one of the things I just love Dr. Shotton. I hope I said that correctly.
Shotton, yeah.
No, right, Dr. Shotton, because I think the world of the work that her college does. I did some pathway work with her and San Juan College some years ago when we built the College Connect program to make sure that we were expanding opportunities. And I think that it's those kinds of programs even that we're doing with my leadership team, thinking about who's left behind, who's not here, not just who's here, who's not here. And how do we make sure that we are the on-ramp to those folks who are not here? And so what I have been doing with my various divisions is what I call leadership, where we actually did a set of trainings for multiple levels of leadership. So not just the top leaders, but throughout the organization, where they could move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset around leadership lenses. Because if we're going to move to transformation, we can't try our old tactics and think they're going to work as we're trying to set forth a new strategic vision. And so I actually used an oldie but goodie, the Bowman and Deal frames. And we did tabletop exercises with various leadership groups so that they could understand, look at your leadership team, look at the mid-manager team. What are the frame that they bring to this conversation? Because if we only look at it from one frame perspective, then we're going to use old tactics while we're trying to implement new strategies. So really getting our institution and the leaders who have to drive change to recognize we can't be risk averse in this season. We actually have to question the assumptions of why we do things. And what may have been done for very good purposes in the past may not necessarily be good for us now. And ultimately challenging our leaders to challenge those that work for them to now think, what is the one thing you're going to change? What is the new relationship you're going to make that you haven't made because you thought you could do everything by yourself? I don't get into the conversation about silos, because that's storing grain, and there are good reasons why you have silos, and maybe you need corn in this and wheat in this. So I don't want to get into the conversation about always making everything about a silo. But quite frankly, we are a big jazz fest school. So we have a 3-day jazz fest here every year, very, very popular national program, Jazz Fest. The power of jazz is improvisation. It's actually working together and feeling your way to what fits to get the outcome that everybody can embrace and enjoy. Well, that's where we are in the college experience today. That's where we are in revitalizing our communities today. We have to become much more improvisational and ultimately make some shifts and pivots that may be uncomfortable because we're so interested in what we've always done. But if your leadership team is not going to commit to being able to see what their lens is and to be very sort of intentional about taking on a much more multi-lens perspective, they're going to try to manage every process and system the way they've always managed the process and system, which may not be effective in this dispensation, given everything that's happening in our environment.
I really like the Bowman and Deal reference. I use that a lot in the training I do on faculty leadership. And I think having that multiple perspective is new for some people to think. Not everyone thinks exactly like me. So I appreciate that. Dr. Shotton, how do you see on your campus?
I certainly bring as an Indigenous woman, my cultural background shapes how I approach leadership. So it's very relational, very communal, and that is how we have approached this work, from a space of community, and as collective work. And so it has been the bringing together both our leadership, but the people who are the drivers of all of this work, to the table, to make sure that those perspectives are informing how we are making decisions, how we are moving forward. Even within our strategic plan, having an implementation committee made up of people who are leads, who are most impacted by the work that's laid out in our strategic plan, and who are the people who are most knowledgeable about that, making sure that we have people at the table who are bringing diverse perspectives. This quote from, or this statement from Dr. Baston that is, around like who's not represented is really important always for me. and how we're thinking about what are the different perspectives, who is this impacting, ultimately students at the center of that, how is this impacting our students, and that they are involved in every bit of this, and that we really do this as a collective endeavor that we are all driving, and that it's not just our leadership or the executive team from top down, that the people who are most impacted are helping to drive every bit of this. And so it is very much a collective approach, and we see this as our community work.
Great, thank you very much. As you think of some of the changes and aspirations you've identified, oftentimes we find people being very fearful of change because there is a comfort in doing things in the same way. As you think about that, and it ties back to some of the issues on trust building, what are some of the strategies you're using on your campus to help diminish some of that fear and to bring people along? And I'll start again with you, Dr. Baston.
We got to connect people to purpose and possibility. I mean, it is so important that people know what's at stake. And I don't think that, when you live in your own sort of kingdom on a campus, so I'm in my faculty kingdom, and I'm not in every aspect of the faculty kingdom, but I'm in the English kingdom or the math kingdom or the science kingdom. When you're in your little kingdom, you really focus on the things that happen in your realm. But we have to get people to understand that the realm is bigger than your kingdom. And in fact, it's not just the faculty, it's the staff as well. And it's not just the staff, it's the students. And it's not just the students, it's the whole community. Because quite frankly, if we allow ourselves to resign ourselves to just operating in our realm of the kingdom, we will not see the fact that the kingdom is being sold off piece by piece. And decisions are being happening that we have nothing to do with. It can happen through your legislature. It can happen through so many different, it can happen through the federal government. It can happen through the reduction of loan programs. It can happen through the reduction of grants that you normally, all of the different things can happen if we are not paying attention. So we dramatize these things. We bring it to people's attention. We allow people to understand this is what's at stake. Not just you won't have a job, but the economic destiny of the region is crippled because we're here to help this region grow through vitality. So I think making sure that people understand what's at stake is critical. Being transparent is also critical. Now, transparency doesn't mean you know everything that we know, because what it means is that you know what you need to know to help us think through what we got to do. The reason why I make that be very clear is because management has the responsibility of managing, and those who are responsible for educating have the responsibility of educating. And I think sometimes, the conversation sort of goes around and around and around. In my state, as an example, we had a Senate bill which was going to, do a lot of damage from the faculty perspective to the faculty rights to a lot of different things. And the expectation was that the president would be on the picket line and picketing and, all this kind of stuff. And just needed to remind people that, you all, and now I have my faculty are in union positions, you all have a strategy, a function, and a role. I have a strategy and a function and a role. I represent 3,300 employees. You represent 329 employees. So I have to make sure that the tail don't wag the dog. I got to make sure that we can actually meet everybody's needs. And I think that there is a way that if you're not clear and you're not transparent and you're not upfront, then it's people don't understand where you stand. I'm always going to stand with students and what's in their best interest, because their success means the success of our community. So we got to make sure that our people know what the challenges are, what the challenges really are. Some institutions like to sugarcoat the challenges. I don't believe in sugarcoating the challenges. I believe in telling the truth about what we're good at and what we're not so good at and what we need to get better at. And I believe in holding people accountable. I think a lot of institutions, not all, not many, but a lot of institutions don't hold people accountable. We don't hold folks to high standards and expectations. And, you know, we get into this place where if a person is a problem in this division, we just move them over to another division instead of moving them out. So from my perspective, we just have to be very, very real. We're in a time where we don't really have additional resources. Many of us, I certainly don't. We don't have, we have to think about the people who are not going to have another shot but this shot. And how do we show up for them? How do we put their purpose ahead of ours? How do we make a promise to them? Our mission is a promise to our people, it's a promise to our students, it's a promise to our community, and it's a promise to each other. How do we ensure, by being honest and upfront and clear, that this is the promise we make and these are the promises we must keep?
Great, thanks very much. Dr. Sean, what are you seeing as ways you're addressing challenges like that on campus?
Well, let me just say, if you want to see some angsty folks, introduce a strategic plan that is outside of any way it's ever been done. Use terms like accountability measures instead of KPI or what we're used to. And you will see both some folks who are super excited to lean into doing something differently, and largely folks that are very anxious about that. What does that mean? And so I appreciate these comments about being accountable. And I'll say that created a lot of conversation on campus around, well, what do we mean by these accountability measures? What happens if we don't meet them? Are we, it was seen as a punitive term, and which was fascinating for me because I'm always coming from, my own cultural perspective where accountability means I'm accountable to our relationships, to other people, to the work. And so we really had to lean into hard conversations about, well, what do you think a KPI is? It is how we're measuring how we're accountable to this work. And so that's just one example, but I think in that, yes, absolutely, transparency, being willing to have the hard conversations, to listen to people, to understand where is the angst coming from, what are the concerns, how do we come to a place where we have a shared understanding and can move forward. I think when you're doing things a little bit differently, and when there are a lot of external pressures, that means there has to be some safety that is offered to folks in being willing to fail, that we can fail forward, that we have to sometimes, as a small institution, be both nimble and agile and intentional in what we do. And how do we balance that? But people have to feel that it is safe to do that. So the trust that you build with folks, one, by being transparent, by being really candid about what are the challenges. And I appreciate Dr. Baston, the comments about, what are the different roles? What are the realities of what we're facing? What are the hard conversations we need to have? And doing that in a way that both honors the reality, is transparent and honest, and also honors what that means for different people, and within there also hanging on to bits of hope, that we can do this, and inspiring people, and helping folks to come together to solve these problems. So it's a lot of conversations. It takes a lot of relationship building, a lot of trust building that comes through communication. It comes through transparency, and it comes through your actions, which takes time. Quite often, and quite candidly for many of us, and that we demonstrate that we will support folks, and that the uncertainty is okay and we can lean into it, and encouraging folks to get comfortable with doing things differently.
Great. Well, stakeholder group that we haven't talked about much in today's session is the role of governing boards. And they are increasingly in the news for some of the work they're doing on campuses. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how you're seeing the role of your board in the work you're doing and some of the ways you're finding support in that way. And Dr. Baston, could you start on that?
Sure. I mean, I'm very, very fortunate. I'll be the first to admit it. I have an amazing board, very, very interested, very, very knowledgeable, recognizes the sort of what's in the circle and out of the circle, so to speak. So they understand that their primary job was to hire a president who hires a management team, and they're very respectful of that sort of obligation, but also they expect assurance that all the things that we are trying to accomplish for our community through the college are being accomplished. So, I'm in a very, very good situation because my board members are open to learning. They are interested. They are actively involved in the community, but they're also actively involved with actually helping us with advocacy on behalf of the college. They are involved in some of our philanthropic work. Two of our trustees, independently and at different locations, built food pantries through their families and friends. So they saw a need because we give them the information about what the students are going to. They talk to students, they listen to students. So I'm in a very, very fortunate position in my institution because most of these folks are, very, very committed. They're all actively involved in the civic life and the business life and the nonprofit life of our community. And so we've been very, very fortunate. We are able to participate in training. They are interested in training. They are interested in talking with other boards to kind of get better and better. So I'm in a unique position because I fully recognize that that's not necessarily the case everywhere. When you have a board that is respectful of the relationship between the board and president, respectful of the boundaries with working with staff and really using the president as the go-through and using the chair as the person that kind of organizes conversations for the group, those kinds of sort of etiquette is so critical for the success of an institution. And I've been very blessed with the institutions that I've worked at. I've been fortunate to have worked with boards that have been very, very good in that regard.
Great. Very lucky scenario. Dr. Shotton, how are you finding the work with your board?
The same. I am definitely, if I consider myself fortunate to have an amazing board of trustees who have been great thought partners, who understand what their specific role is and also respect what is within my domain and what is within their domain, but who are invested in the mission of the college and the work of the college. For some of my colleagues who may not have that experience, I know we see it in the news and we are seeing different experiences. They're extremely supportive and have leaned in when they need to and stood back when it's not within their domain, respecting what is the purview of the president. And I've had the benefit of getting to work with that board for 3 years as a vice president. So in some of our, some of our college's work, they are also very invested in our students. We as an institution are our students at the center. That's our mission. And so I'm preparing tomorrow. We have our quarterly Board of Trustees meeting this week, and tomorrow they will come in as they do every fall, and they have a student convening. So they meet with our students to hear what's top of mind, so that they make sure that they are getting that perspective as they are making decisions. Because the other thing we'll be doing at their meeting is presenting budget talking about enrollment, talking about the strategic plan, and having those student perspectives are really critical, and it shapes how they guide us. They represent different sectors and backgrounds, but are deeply committed to the institution and to higher education, and more than anything have been amazing thought partners on the work. And the question I get most often when I'm meeting with both my chair individual trustees is, how can we support you? Which is a great relationship to have with your board.
Pam, you're actually on mute.
There we go. Trying to do two things at once. You'd think after all these years. Before we open this up for questions, what parting advice might you give to college leaders and aspiring leaders to support transformative change? And I'll start with you, Dr. Shotton.
I think I spoke to this. The relationship piece is critical. Because transformative change is only going to happen with all of us, and how we build those relationships and trust within our campuses, within our communities, across our boards, our governing boards, with our students, is really important, because it's going to entail hard work, and while hard work is some of the best work, a willingness to do that together is really important, and building those relationships and trust are critical to that. So, I think my best advice, as all of 4 months into my presidency, but throughout my career, I would say in any of the work that I've engaged with, has been tending to caring for relationships, because that will be at the center of any kind of transformative change and the work that we have to do in higher education.
Great. And what would you add, Dr. Baston?
I guess I'd add just 3 things. 1, lead with clarity, because people can't follow confusion. If you don't know what you're doing, if people are confused, you'll never be able to move into the state of clarity. And so as the leader, you got to know your mission. You've got to be able to keep the main thing. Always keep that mission central to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, because that's your promise. The second thing is lead with courage, because transformation is always going to be resistance. You're always going to have the cave people, the committee against virtually everything. You're always going to have the road warriors, that these are people that are retired on active duty. You always going to have some folks that are just not going to get with it no matter what it is, because they didn't come up with it, or they will say, well, we came up with that a long time ago. You're always going to have people that'll give you every reason why you shouldn't. But you have to have the courage to say, that's why when folks said, oh, this TV thing is not going to last, stick with your radio. What happened? Oh, I can't wait to go get my blockbuster, make it a blockbuster night. So you got to make sure that you have the courage to move forward. And it's easy to protect the past. That's what people do. You don't, and the past is always way better when you recall it than it actually was. So you got to have the courage to keep moving forward. And then the last thing is compassion. So yeah, I'm saying be clear, and yeah, I'm saying be courageous, but also be compassionate, because you have to remember that whatever wall was built in your institution, somebody put the brick in the wall. Maybe they didn't put it in the right way, or maybe that brick was appropriate at the time they placed it, but their effort, their energy, everything they had was in that brick. And now you finna take that wall down. So as you do that, you have to honor the past. You should be able to find the lessons from the past that ultimately allow you to transition to the future. I'm the 5th president of Cuyahoga Community College. I have used the lessons from all 4 previous presidents on how they were the parts of the building of where we're going. And that in every one of their presidencies, transformation was a part of that presidency. So mine is no different, and we build off of the strength of others. So clarity, courage, and most importantly, compassion.
Wonderful. Well, now we have an opportunity to open up the webinar to any questions from participants. And so whoever might have a question, if you might raise your hand or put it in the chat. And if you could identify your role at your institution. Katie.
Hello, I'm Katie Giardello. I actually work for the state of Michigan, and I'm leading a statewide transfer project. I found some of your comments about political involvement and the local politics very interesting, but I'd like to ask you about larger politics. And Dr. Baston, I appreciated what you said about kind of staying in your lane, and people wanted you out picketing with Senate Bill 1. But if you can say more about your relationship to kind of the state policy environments in your states, and what do you think is a productive relationship for those of us that work in the trenches on the policy end to be supportive to you all?
The critical thing is to stay missional. And that's why I tried to let everybody know what is going to enable us to accomplish our mission. For me, mission is promise. So what is the promise we're making to the community? What is the promise that we're making to the people who come here? And because if you focus on the promise, then all your policy conversations should be about what policies are inhibiting your ability to keep your promise, what policies are enabling you to keep your promise. When the conversation is about promise, then it becomes less political because it actually talks about what we all believe is available to all of us: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We all believe that. We may think about it in different ways, but as a community college, as an example, we have a very fundamental promise to establish and ensure every person could be a part of the opportunity ecosystem in that local community. So when we have policies, whether they're SNAP, Medicaid on the federal side, or whether it's whatever those policies are that impact that specific promise that we are trying to keep, we have to think from a policy perspective, what is it that we can do to secure the liberty for the people in the community? So, for example, back in the day when we had the welfare to work world issue in the 90s, I'll just put it that way. One of the first things that community college did said, well, we want to make work experience participation connected to short-term credential acquisition in a community college. Because if we actually make that akin, you're actually giving people the opportunity to develop the pathway forward, and you're not cutting them off of benefits that they critically need to take care of their families now. So it is, how do we think about education in the policy space as helping to advance the cause of people and the vibrancy of communities?
Dr. Shotton, do you have anything to add on that?
I don't know what much more I can add to that. Spot on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Brett Bisger, University of Pittsburgh. Great to see you all. So higher ed institutions are complex, lots of people with lots of different roles. And I think about change as kind of like moving a cruise ship, that it takes a while for that to happen. Can you talk a little bit about sustaining change? And a lot of times I've seen presidents share their vision, get their cabinet on board, and then getting the dissemination to the frontline people sometimes gets hard. So talking about the balance of moving from vision to actually sharing it way downstream so the cruise ship can move.
Well, I'll jump in. And I think I talked a little bit about that. One thing that I think I've been finding, and I think we probably all have experienced, is, the fatigue that comes with that. When there's been a change in leadership, when you have a change in direction, when you have a new strategic plan, or whatever it might be, there's a certain amount of fatigue. And so addressing that, naming it, and working to make sure that we're not, people aren't getting whiplash from constantly shifting directions, right? I think is important. For us, that's why I'll use our strategic plan as an example. That's why we developed a campus-wide implementation group of the people that weren't VPs or deans or administrators that were driving the work. It was directors, assistant directors, coordinators, so people who are actually on the front lines of that work, so that they were on board, because it can't just come from the top. They have to be the folks who are driving it, because they're the ones who are going to have to implement it. If we are doing something to change in advising, I better have our actual advisors at the table helping to drive that work and tell me what the reality of that change is going to mean for them and how we best get to that, rather than having a VP say, this is how I think we should do it. And so for us, it has created a collective buy-in for folks. And it has also created a better process that allows us to not get too far down the road and problems that we didn't think of are popping up, because the people who have to do it are at the table telling us, this is how we should lay this work out, and this is how we roll it out. And that's been really important in our work. And having the conversations head on when folks are talking about workload, fatigue, burnout, change, all of that, and working to address that in a caring way.
I would just say that I didn't start with vision. I did not start with vision. I started with listening. I did a 100-day listening session. I listened to 2,500 people over a 100-day period. Internal, external. And then from that listening session, I had our students, our court and captioning students, actually take all the transcripts to come up with the documents that then was given to institutional research to develop the themes. And then we went back to the community and the various stakeholders said, are these themes correct? So you want us to have a culture of clarity, because we're a very complex, big institution. Nobody knows what's going on. So clarity, number one. Number two, redefine student experience, because different students have different experiences, and that's not cool. And then third, like value proposition. We have to strengthen our value proposition. How do we make sure that people understand what we do and why we do it and how it benefits them, so that they can actually get more people to come here? So it was those basic things, that listening to the rank and file, that then started the process of saying, okay, well, what are we going to do about it now? What do you think? So then we did an ideas festival. So every one of our campuses did their own ideas festivals, and then we surfaced up the best ideas, and we prioritized 3 ideas that came from the people, not the vice presidents, the deans, the ploop ploop, the grand poobahs, none of those people, all the everybody people. Now, there's a reason why I had this strategy. I didn't start out as a college president. I started out as a student affairs worker, rolling up the little fake act, looked like it was a degree that you get at graduation, steaming the gowns, writing the script, I was a designated school official for CVIS, all of the academic counseling, all the kinds of things that people on the front line have to do. And I was a teacher. So I was a faculty member. Now I didn't have no teacher assistants marking my papers or nothing like that. And I was still practicing law. So at the end of the day, because I had to do all the different things, I could speak with a level of honesty and clarity to everybody. Like, I know what you got to go through, because I've done some of these things, not everything you do, but I've done enough so that there's a level of authenticity that I bring to the conversation. But I also don't let you get away with stuff, because I did a lot of different things. So I kind of know you can't just know me. Everybody's not always in a meeting. It's like the computer's not always down. I used that plenty of times when I was vice president of student affairs. Oh, I can't respond because the computer's down. I did all that stuff. We all do things to get around doing what we don't want to do. So, but it is a different experience when you then say to the people, you write the plan. You tell us because when you frame it as a promise, what you're saying to your people is, what are you promising? Because that's what we're going to hold you accountable to. Whatever your job is, if you are the maintenance person, if you are the cafeteria person, if you are teaching, the quadratic equations in your math, whatever it is, what is the promise in the role that you have? And then I have one last thing that I say to everybody who works for us. I don't care what their job is. Your responsibility is to ask a student their GPA. What's their goal? What's their plan? What actions are they taking? You do not have to be the academic advisor to ask those 3 questions. You just have to be a nice person. And if we can get more of our people to just be nice people, then more students will feel they belong and they will actually stay and succeed because somebody cares. So it's not always the 193-page report and the plans and blah, 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 blah. It's, have you asked somebody if they're all right? And if they're not, can you get them to somebody that can help them get all right? Because if we focus on the promise that each of us have to bring to the conversation, I think we'll get further. Change is, listen, many people say, I'm not going to teach online because I don't like online. And then we had a global pandemic, and guess what? Now they don't want to come back to campus to teach. So it's just, the reality is helping people build the change muscle and not allowing them to use that as an excuse is important.
Very helpful. Well, as we're getting ready to close out this session, I'd be really interested in hearing what you might share about what is giving you hope for the future. And Dr. Shotton, you're the person that had mentioned hope earlier. So tell us what's giving you hope.
All day, every day, it's our students, because they choose to show up. And as long as they choose to show up, I'm going to show up with them. And, when I hear from our students, we talk about connecting passion to purpose. And when I hear about what their passions are and how we are able to connect that to a career or to solving a problem in their community, and just the amazing work that they're doing, that is what gives me hope. I look at one of our students who recently graduated, who came from the Navajo Nation reservation, grew up in a community that people did not have electricity, and was an engineering student, and took what she was learning in engineering and worked with a faculty member, her professor, and said, how do we install solar panels and energy on my reservation, so that, one, my family and other people can have access to electricity to store healthy food, medication, life-saving access to electricity. And it has turned into, it was an individual project for her, and now it turned into an entire project and student organization that is engaging in this work to bring solar power and electricity to homes that otherwise didn't have access. That is a student who was a first-gen college student and came to Fort Lewis and used every bit of what she learned here to go back and make a difference, not just for her own family, but her entire community and for generations. So as long as those students are showing up, then we owe it to them. And that's what gives me hope every day, because those are the problems that they're solving.
Great. How about you, Dr. Baston? And then we'll close out this session. I know we're at the top of the hour.
There is a will to rise, because in fact, regardless of what we ever go through, if you get up in the morning and you get out of bed and you still push, that will to rise is the hope of the world.
Thank you very much. This was a great session, and I hope a lot of people access this online as well. Thank you so much for offering your great advice to the participants today. Appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So thank you again for joining today's webinar. Thank you to Dr. Eddy for facilitating this conversation, and to Dr. Baston and Dr. Shotton for sharing your experience, your expertise, and your insights with us. I just want to close with a couple of quick CSC reminders. The call for proposals for the 2026 CSCC conference is out and available on our website, cscc.pitt.edu. We're accepting submissions through November 3rd, so still a couple of weeks to get those proposals in. The conference will be in Salt Lake City on April 2nd through 4th, 2026. And we're also accepting nominations for the 2026 CSC Awards, and that call for nominations can also be found on our website. So we hope that you'll submit conference proposals and award nominations and just help us spread the word. And we hope that we'll see you in Salt Lake City in the spring. So thank you, and until next time.